Welcome all to another ZeroBounce webinar. I'm Paul Leslie, a content creator here at ZeroBounce. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And today we are going to be talking about why top go-to-market teams obsess over deliverability in 2025. Deliverability is an ever-changing game, and it's a challenge to get your emails seen. You're going to have a lot of great information today. I'm always curious to know, where are you all joining us from? There's always people who join us from all over the world, and that's always exciting to me. Please drop a comment there. And just to go over a little bit of the housekeeping for today's webinar, the most frequently asked question, yes, indeed, this webinar is being recorded. You are going to get a copy of this webinar. It's also going to be on YouTube probably by the end of the day. I see we've got Buster from Newport, Peter from Egypt, Heather from Fayetteville, Arkansas, Alexandria from North Texas, Jania, I hope I'm pronouncing like that correctly, from Oregon. I see you all can use the comments. Please don't be shy about anything that may come to your mind. And also, if you have any questions, we are going to do our best to get to every question that you ask. So just drop those questions as they come to you. So today's agenda, you're going to meet the very fine gentlemen from ZeroBounce and SalesCaptain who are going to be presenting today. And we're going to be covering why deliverability is harder and more important than ever in 2025. Also, what good looks like, some critical benchmarks, red flags, etc. Quick wins and easy fixes. Everybody likes those. Tips and tactics you can use to fix common issues fast. And recommended tool stack for modern deliverability. Again, any questions, please drop those questions and we will do our best to get with them. We're going to be bringing out shortly Jack Bolter. He is an account executive here at ZeroBounce, an accomplished sales expert. You also may be interested to know that he is the previous owner of his own agency, and he's a very accessible guy. He was just talking to me in the pre-show, and he invites everybody out there, please connect with him on LinkedIn. You've got that handy-dandy QR code there to the right. Jack would love to hear from you. And it's a great pleasure to present Bill Stathopoulos, the CEO at SalesCaptain. And to tell you a little bit about him, he also happens to have authored a book, Cold Email Secrets, and LinkedIn's Top Lead Generation Voice 2024. There's no QR code, but Bill is indeed on LinkedIn as well. Be sure, look him up and connect with him. So to proudly tell you about ZeroBounce, ZeroBounce is the #1 email verifier in the world. With more than 400,000 clients, you see many well-known brands there to your right. LinkedIn, Netflix, Amazon, and I'm sure many of you all are ZeroBounce customers, and we thank you for that. A little bit about SalesCaptain. SalesCaptain is ranked by Clutch as one of the top outbound and GTM agencies. By combining AI data and proven multi-channel outbound systems, SalesCaptain helps companies generate meetings with in-market buyers and scale pipeline and revenue without increasing costs. And I'm going to bring on Jack and Bill. Jack, Bill, how are you?
Good, Paul.
Hey. Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Are you all ready to kick this thing off?
Ready to go.
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to disappear. I'll be back at the Q&A, and you all have a great webinar.
Cheers, Paul.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, I think we're going to start off with why deliverability is so tough in 2025. And I'm sure this is a topic a lot of you have been speaking about and had issues with, like a lot of the clients that we speak to now. So yeah, if we can get the next slide, we're going to start going through a few reasons. So reason number one is stricter sending guidelines. So over the last 2 or 3 years actually, and especially since last year, the ESPs have been putting in a lot more requirements for actually sending out emails, especially for bulk senders, anyone sending a large volume. So we had Google and Yahoo started off last year requiring the implementation of SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, Microsoft joining suit as well. This only seems to be a continuing trend over the last few years, and it only looks like it's going to get stricter going forward. So deliverability is something that's becoming increasingly important and something you can't ignore nowadays if you are sending any significant volume of emails. If we go on to the next slide, you can see a few additional guidelines that you should be following. So putting in unsubscribe links, keeping the spam rate down, bounce rate down, and we're going to go through how you can actually do some of that later in the presentation. I think, Bill, if you want to jump in now.
Yeah, we can answer this a little bit moving forward as well. The spam complaint rate, because there's a lot of stats, a lot of KPIs that we should be monitoring. I would say put a special asterisk next to the spam complaint rate, especially if you are what Google and Microsoft, the ESPs, consider a mass bulk email sender, more than 5,000 emails a day, because it's quite critical, and we can explain a little bit just to leave a cliffhanger there. But keep in mind that number, 5,000 emails a day, it might seem like a lot, but it includes any email sent from your organization out to any other organization out there. So anyone doing outbound, super red flag. Anyone doing email marketing, also red flag, because it includes emails from your sales team, emails coming from your team, like anything pretty much that goes out into other companies. And it's a low percentage, like 0.3% spam complaint rate is quite low. Yeah. This is when the news broke. I tend to keep screenshots of it. This is from Google back in February 2024. You can still search that. Thankfully, it only applies for doing outreach to company inboxes, to companies. But one other thing that came as a consequence is you can no longer do outbound or cold email to Gmail addresses, which you would think, why is this an issue? But if you think about it, a lot of SMBs, a lot of local businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs, think of photo studios, yoga teachers, gyms, whatever it might be, they don't actually use corporate domains and email addresses. They just sign up for a Gmail address and they use that as their work email. So if you end up doing outbound to specific segments, for example, we have a lot of clients that are reaching out to SMBs, small businesses, local businesses as well. And we saw quite a few of the campaigns that included a lot of Gmails as the recipients, even when the Gmail was scraped from a company's website, proving that it's an actual work email, not a personal email address. We're still seeing deliverability be heavily impacted. So there's quite a few things, and we'll go through them in a sec, that have changed since last year that make deliverability and outbound especially challenging for GTM teams in 2025. Yeah, this is another one. Again, me and taking screenshots, being in multiple forums about 6 months ago. As soon as the updates that we were discussing from Google and Microsoft went live, a lot of people started wondering why their outbound emails are just going to spam or not being delivered at all. This is just a consequence of everything that we've been discussing. Yeah, same on here. Google has even become strict about including things like pixels. You might have seen tools like SmartLead, for example, recommending that you turn off open tracking. Open tracking, the way it works is they put an invisible image file within the email, and when that is opened, we know that the email has been read. ESPs like Google, for example, are now even cracking down on that, showing the recipients of your outbound things like this. Banners saying images are being hidden, which means that your open tracking might actually not be working. Not good.
Yeah, and the next reason is the actual email data itself. And again, that's on a somewhat negative trend from a deliverability point of view. So email list decay, so that means the amount of invalid and bad email addresses in your email list is on average across the board increasing, whether that's spam traps, disposable, so that's coming from bots, toxic emails, that sort of thing, abuse emails, so people actually marking emails as spam, all of that's increasing. And another trend is obviously nowadays people tend to move jobs a lot more. So if you're sending to B2B emails, company domains, then it's more likely that that person has now left that job and therefore the address is going to be invalid. So all these trends are sort of leading towards the fact that overall people tend to have more invalid data, which is another big issue. And the next one is on a very talked about point, which is AI. And obviously there are a lot of good things when it comes to AI and sending emails and mass email outreach, and we'll get to those in a bit as well. But one of the ways that AI is actually preventing people or making it more difficult to send more emails is detecting the content, and anything like images or anything that's not the best quality content, it's easier for AI to detect that and mark those emails as spam. So you really have to up your game and make sure you're sending high quality emails. Again, this can be looked at as an advantage for people that are sending very relevant, personalized, high quality emails that people actually want to see. And I'm sure Bill will get on to how people can kind of use that for their advantage in a bit.
Yeah, it's funny how email came from AI came from both sides, like helping ASPs filter out more emails, while at the same time enabling anyone doing outbound to have better data to be able to do personalization at scale. It's quite interesting how like both sides are simultaneously using similar types of tech to kind of tackle this.
Yeah, exactly. I think the next reason, so again, touching on that point, a way the tech has changed in this space, people now can obviously set up a lot of different email accounts and use subdomains and different domains to create a separate email infrastructure and protect your main domain from getting a bad reputation, which is obviously a good thing. You definitely want to keep that main domain protected. But what it means is you're creating these new domains, which then themselves have no sending history, no positive reputation. So if you just create a new domain and start sending emails straight away, those are highly likely to land in spam and not reach your target recipient because you don't have that positive reputation that you've built up over the years with your main domain. So there are tools out there now, including an email warm-up tool, which ZeroBounce provides, which basically automates that process of warming up the email, creating a positive reputation. So the way ours works, we send emails to a list of seed email addresses and we engage with those. So you're getting that guaranteed positive engagement, especially useful for those new accounts, like I said, but even for a domain that's already been sending emails or maybe has been damaged with bad practices in the past, you can restore that domain. A way I like to think about it is an insurance policy for your sending. So you've got that guaranteed level of positive engagement.
Yeah, I think it has become almost a must. Obviously, as you said, not using the main domain for any kind of sending because you definitely want to protect that, but also for any secondary domains that people send up and they're going to have to set up given what's going on. They're going to need warm up. Like it's literally in our standardized checklist before a cold email campaign goes live. It's email warm up at least for like 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing that trend with a lot more people becoming aware about warm up, asking about it. And I think, like you said there, obviously you're ahead of the curve, so you're already implementing it as a requirement. But I think in a few years, everyone else will catch up and it'll be something that everyone's doing, similar to how validation is nowadays.
Yeah, it's just a funny game with cat and mouse that we're playing with ESPs right now. We've been using email warm-up literally since 2022. Since if it first became available, we jumped at it. But there's different ways to do it, and I think we'll discuss in a little bit why the tool that you pick for this actually matters quite a bit for both your sending tool as well as your warm-up tool. But yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, we'll definitely get onto that. And I think the final reason we're going to go through is general privacy guidelines. So these sort of guidelines, GDPR, CAN spam, etc., have been around for years, but the implementation and the scope of these is again trending stricter, and there's more countries bringing them in, different regulations for different areas, even affecting the actual content and the copy of the emails now, not just whether someone's opted in. Obviously, with cold email, it can be a bit different, but in general, you want some sort of expression of interest that the person actually wants to receive the emails. And I know Bill and SalesCaptain do a lot of cool stuff with the inbound led outbound and things like that you can do nowadays. So there are definitely cool ways to do it. Again, this is another trend where these guidelines are making it difficult, or more important rather, to focus on deliverability.
Nice. Yeah. So, I think everyone can, if people are not suicidal at this point or depressed, I think we've painted quite a picture for what has been going on over the last year and a half. And it is as bad as it sounds. Like, honestly, if you were doing outbound in 2022, 2023, even before that, and then you came across outbound or cold email or any type of mass sending in 2024, especially beginning of 2025, there's so many things going on, most of which we just covered, that really make it hard. Like it make it not a straightforward game. I do remember my first outbound campaign, I think around 2018, 2019, which just had 3 inboxes from one domain or something like that. It was like, super high volumes. But yeah, those days are gone. And we're going to be discussing a little bit about what the future is for outbound. Yeah, there's also good developments as well. Again, mostly thanks to AI, from tools like ZeroBounce to Clay to Twain, allowing us to do more personalization, do it at scale, and allowing us to an extent do from what Jack mentioned, inbound-led outbound, which we're going to be touching on in a little bit, all the way to literally separating the recipients that we have on our lists based on what providers they're using. A lot of cool things that we'll dive deep in just a sec. Yeah, and it's true. Like it's not uncommon, right? All channels go through cycles where they get harder. Email marketing, when it started in 1996 or something like that, it was super easy to do. In fact, Seth Godin, who pioneered email marketing, was being laughed at from big brands when he was pitching them. They should be reaching out to their customers via email. And now it's the most prevalent channel, and literally our email is our ID. Same thing as if you've been doing meta ads or anything in the advertising space, you would have seen that ads have also become more expensive. It's exactly the same thing with outbound, right? You used to need 1 inbox, 3 inboxes, and maybe not even a sending tool. There used to be mail merge tools that you could use a Google Sheet to do the sending from, and now you need warm up, you need inboxes, you need all this infrastructure that eventually, no matter how cheap these tools are, they still make it more expensive. So it's kind of like an optimization game. Like, okay, what's the minimum amount of infrastructure and hustle you need to still be effective? Yeah. We just kind of discussed this a little bit. It's still quite a good channel. And one more reason, besides and despite ads getting more expensive, is also the fact that AI is also changing SEO. So in terms of the channels, we're definitely going to be seeing ads becoming even more expensive because SEO is going to become AI driven to a large extent. Roughly 1 out of 3 demo calls that we receive for SalesCaptain come from search, come from AI. They don't come from Google search results themselves. So people are going to shift more into both ads, which are going to become more expensive, and also a lot more into outbound. So it's definitely the channel to still be looking at if you're into B2B marketing, growth, and go-to-market. Yeah. So what do we do moving forward? That's the $1 million question. Cool. Yeah, a few of the tips. I think we've covered it a little bit. We're going to be looking at what the new infrastructure looks like in 2025 and beyond, how to use AI to avoid spam filters, land into the inbox, and also look into both entry level as well as advanced deliverability hacks that are going to take you to 2025 and beyond. Awesome. The resources, they're also included in the end. This is just a quick preview of some of the things we've put in place for you guys. If you want to scan the QR code, If you stay till the end, there's also a lot of cool things that we've prepared for you with ZeroBounce from SalesCaptain's end as well. So definitely stay tuned. There's more stuff coming. This is just a small teaser to get us started. And let's go into the main part. Awesome.
Yeah, so we've touched on kind of the landscape and where we're at now and why deliverability is so important, how cold emails changed over the last few years. So what does good performance actually look like? Well, there's a few key metrics that you can look at. So one of them is obviously going to be bounce rate. So you want to keep that bounce rate as low as possible, ideally under 2%. Another one that we touched on earlier and Bill said is especially important, should have a little asterisk on it, is that spam complaint rate. You want to keep that below 0.1%. As soon as you go over that figure, then the ESPs will start looking at your emails, marking your other emails as spam, basically consider you someone who's not providing high quality content. So you've got kind of two aspects to this. One is whether the email list is actually opted in, and the other one is arguably more important, is the content actually relevant? So are you getting engagement with that emails? Are you sending emails that someone actually wants to receive? So when you're creating your campaigns, you need to put yourself in the shoes of your client or your prospects, whoever you're targeting. Will they actually want to receive this email? Are you providing value up front? You're not just asking for a call or something like that, where they're not getting anything out of it and they're not actually going to engage. Obviously, unsubscribe rates as well, keeping those low. So that ties in again to the content you're sending. Is it high quality? Is it relevant and something that person actually wants to receive? As well as obviously all the technical side of it. Do you have your infrastructure set up correctly with the authentication? On top of that,
these are kind of just before we dive into the other slide, these are the negative. Like, this is what happens when things go ugly. You don't want this to go beyond these marks, because things can get quite rough. But we also have to look into the KPIs from what it means to actually perform well.
Yeah, exactly. So from the positive point of view, you want to keep your obviously open rates and click-through rates high. Obviously, there's some issues now with tracking those, and then the trade-off with deliverability, like Bill mentioned earlier, with open rates, it includes a little pixel, so that's something to consider there. Obviously, then on top of that, conversion. So whatever your CTA or whatever the goal of your campaigns is, it's going to be different for everyone. Some people, they just want to reply. Some people are booking in a meeting, getting people to sign up to a webinar, newsletter, whatever it is. And maybe it's just building the awareness, so you don't even want a reply at all. So obviously that's going to vary from person to person and every different use case. Whatever your goal of your campaign is, you want to make sure you're actually hitting that goal. Again, this ties into what we were saying, or what I was just saying earlier, with keeping the messaging relevant. And the more segmented and the more targeted you can be with your list, the easier that's going to be. There's a lot you can do now with generic personalization, first name, company name, job title, that sort of thing with these AI tools. That simple personalization, it's good, but a lot of the time it doesn't really do the job. It's much better to have a relevant message that's going to be that person is actually going to want to engage in, rather than just generic personalization for the sake of it. But at the same time, like I'm sure Bill will discuss some of the stuff that they're doing with Clay and other AI tools, there is a lot you can do with really segmenting those lists, making the messaging really relevant, and even personalizing for every single lead or prospect that you've got. So there is a lot of stuff you can do out there now. So it's not really much of an excuse to not be doing that and not be segmenting your list.
I love the way you're phrasing it, but yeah, you're actually right. Yeah, it's crazy what you can do with AI, especially in terms of data. And I'm not going to spoil it. There's a lot of cool stuff that we're going to go through, but yeah, let's move on. Sorry, yeah, I don't want to cover.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously on top of that, again, monitoring your reputation, blacklist monitoring, DMARC, again, that's tying into the infrastructure side of things. So red flags that you can spot, again, bounce rates, which we touched on, and there's a lot of different reasons for those, the technical infrastructure, but obviously the data you're sending to as well. And again, with the opens and engagements, you want to look for any drop-offs, any big changes, and based on that, you can identify what's causing it. If you make a big change to your campaigns, you suddenly see a big drop-off, then you know, okay, that's the reason that this has happened. Or you set up a new domain, new alternative sending domains, and you see a big drop-off, you know, okay, that's the reason. And then you look at warm-up or whatever the solution is to that problem.
Yeah, and one out there regarding the bounce rates and the KPIs, especially the negative KPIs that you just mentioned, make a point to track it at least once a week. So obviously, depending on your sending volumes, we actually track it daily to make sure that if we need to substitute any inboxes or if we need to do any changes, we're rapid. Because if you lose a week of sending, it definitely impacts your results directly, especially if you're doing outbound. But at least once a week, just have a simple Google sheet, and then a number of inboxes or infrastructure, just have a checkbox that you have someone go through and just check it Friday end of the day or Monday for the week before, just to make sure that you're keeping track of it and you can keep track of your stats, because it's hard to remember what happened a month ago. And also there might be a little bit of seasonality. So if you have stats, and we now have stats all the way back to 2021, it's quite helpful to be able to go back and say, oh, okay, maybe this is a seasonal thing. Maybe our open rates are dropping, not because it's deliverability, maybe because people are on holidays, Juneteenth, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. On that point, Bill, what's your opinion on tracking open rates, considering what you were saying earlier with the pixel and deliverability stuff? Is that something that you guys still do?
Yeah, so there's definitely mixed opinions on that. I know a lot of people who are not tracking open rates, and I agree to an extent that we shouldn't be tracking them, especially because they tend to be a false stat. The actual stat should be either replies, if we have that as a KPI, or demo calls or whatever we want to get, or traffic to the landing page. What we do, which I think is a silver line, is we track open rates up until we're certain that the open rates are high and the campaign is doing well. And then once we start receiving results and the campaigns are fully functional, we switch off open rates just to make sure that we maximize deliverability, like anything that we can do that can affect deliverability negatively. And then especially if we see our stats declining, if we see our unsubscribe rate increasing, if we see the negative replies increasing, or if any of the inboxes get compromised, we'll turn off open rate directly, because we know what the baseline is for the industry, whether it's 30, 40%, 50, 60%. So we don't need to know that. If things are going badly, we just want to turn it off so our inboxes can be back to like perfect health as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I know a lot of people have that question about open rate tracking nowadays. So that's a good strategy for that. And then another big red flag, which we touched on again, is obviously spam complaints. Again, you want to keep that as low as possible. Pretty much ties in again to the relevant, or how relevant the message is. Is it something that person actually wants to receive at the end of the day?
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's better for them to unsubscribe versus click spam complaint. So definitely make it easy for them to unsubscribe. It's not mandatory. Like if you look at the global regulations right now, I think only Canada requires you to have an unsubscribe link by law, as long as you have, at least for outbound, right? I'm not talking inbound, should be fully consent driven, 100% unsubscribe link and all that. And there's definitely different local regulations. And also with the EU, the problem is there's different interpretations of GDPR. Some are stricter, like in Germany and Switzerland. Some are more relaxed. So it's definitely, it does play quite a role, because we do outbound in so many different countries globally. We now know kind of like the no zones where we know that outbound is gonna get a few rough replies, but we're all used to that. So unsubscribe links are technically mandatory in Canada, but we use them across our campaigns. because we want to make sure that people have an easy way out. Because if they don't, then they'll just click the spam complaint button, which is the worst thing that they can do to our campaigns.
Yeah, like you said, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to do that. And if you're hesitant to do that, it probably says something about the campaigns you're sending. So you should probably reassess that first.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's go then.
So yeah, a few other quick wins on the deliverability side. So first one, cleaning up the database. We've touched on, again, obviously one of the biggest areas where you can improve your sender reputation and deliverability is the data you're sending to. And it's one of the simplest things to do as well. So you want to be using some sort of verification tool, whether it's ZeroBounce or someone else. Obviously, I'm slightly biased, but even if you're not using us, you want to be using one of the other tools out there. If you're not doing any sort of validation, that's a big red flag, and you're without doubt going to run into issues at some point if you haven't already. Also, in terms of actually collecting your data, there are validation tools, including ZeroBounce, that has an API, which means you can integrate on the front end. So when you're actually collecting the data, you can validate at the point of entry, at the point of sign up, whether it's on a web form, you're running ads to a landing page, whatever it is, rather than letting the bad data get into your system, get into your database, your CRM. You can check at the point of sign up whether there's any sort of disposable, toxic bots, even just something as simple as a spelling mistake or a typo where someone's genuinely trying to give you their email, but they just make a mistake when they're typing, which is easily done. You can filter out those things. And on top of that, it actually enables you to audit your data process. So with ZeroBounce, for example, you get a number of statuses and sub-status. So it's not just good or bad or a simple score. You can see the reason why you're getting an invalid result or do not mail, whether it's a role-based email, disposables or toxics, like I mentioned. So based on that, you can then work backwards and reverse engineer where your data is coming from, which sources are actually performing well, which sources aren't performing so well, and that can determine your advertising budget or where you want to focus your resources, which is obviously going to be really useful going forward.
You touched on a really good point, which is that people tend to think that an email can be valid or invalid, but the truth of it is there's so many statuses in between. And sometimes if you actually have the data, as you mentioned, using tools like ZeroBounce, and you identify what is the main case. For example, in larger businesses, they typically use more Microsoft as their email provider. They have different kind of setups. Smaller businesses, you might come across a lot of Gmail addresses. So if you're able to use a tool that gives you those insights, you can then go back, as you said, to your data sources. And then the difference in the source that you use, even the validation tool, can have a big impact in both your marketing and sender reputation, as well as the effectiveness of your campaigns overall. Like we've seen really big changes in our outbound campaigns when we switch the email provider that we get for the data.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, if you want to keep it simple, you can. Valid are the ones that are good to send to, but it's always useful to have a tool that gives you that data and you have that data available if you do want to use it. Another step is obviously authenticating your domain. So DMARC is a big thing we're seeing now. Basically, DMARC stops people from spoofing your domain. So if you don't have DMARC set up correctly, anyone can actually create an email account on your domain and pretend to be you. And obviously, if they then send spam emails pretending to be you, that's going to damage your reputation. So using some sort of DMARC monitor where you can firstly work out if that is happening, and if it is, you can quarantine and reject those emails. So stop people from being able to do that and block those emails. That's going to be something that's really useful. And obviously this stuff, like we touched on the infrastructure side and the trends with the ESPs, it's not optional anymore. These are things that you need to be doing. And if you don't have the correct infrastructure set up, then you're not going to be able to send emails at all. again, unsubscribe links. So we mentioned that that's something that you definitely want to be including. If you're not including it, then you want to make it as easy as possible, like we said, for people to be able to opt out. And although, okay, yeah, you might think, okay, why do we want to make it possible for people to opt out? But again, if you're sending high quality emails, people won't want to opt out, and it's going to make you more trustworthy. And ultimately, in the long run, you're going to have better deliverability. You're going to get a better return on your campaigns because you've done that. It's a very short-term mindset to think, okay, we're not going to include the link for this one campaign to get 10 extra emails in the inbox, but you're damaging your reputation in the long term.
Yeah, the issue with unsubscribe links has more to do with, and including links in general or mass sending, has more to do with whether you end up on the promotions tab versus the inbox or the other folder, and less to do with whether your email actually gets delivered. Because if it has any links, it's going to get there. Yeah, I'll just emphasize once again, like for me, the main setup for sending is SPF, DKIM, DMARC by default. And they're super easy to set up. Like if you know how to set up one of them, you know how to set up all of them. It's not technical. And we've added the link in the slides for how to do it. My bonus is if your emails actually include any links, make sure to include custom link tracking, especially if you're doing outbound. You don't want to be using, SmartLead or Lemlist as the sending URL. Obviously, they'll do things to try and help you with that, but you should have link tracking set up as well, as along with those records. Yeah. Another one that we've seen as well that has to do with the sending inboxes. If you're using Google or Microsoft as your sending providers, I don't know if people remember that. If anyone was doing outbound, 3 or 4 years ago, send a note in the chat, just drop a comment. Also drop comments for any questions you guys have, and Paul will help us go through them in the end. But you used to be able to send, I think, 500 to 1,000 emails through one Google inbox a day, one Google Workspace inbox, which is crazy. We're now discussing limiting this to like 30 emails a day versus 1,000, which is crazy, but it is what it is. And it just explains why you need so many inboxes in 2025 to do outbound, to do the same volume of outbound that you used to do 4 years ago. With just 3 inboxes, you now need 30, 40, 50, 60 inboxes, a lot of times 100 inboxes just for one type of campaign, just for one client in our case. If you're using Microsoft, it's even tighter. Your question might be, why would I use Microsoft? I'll explain this in a sec, but we've seen better deliverability when you use Microsoft inboxes in certain cases. If you're using it, just make sure you have 10 emails a day per inbox as your default sending in your sending tool, or you'll end up in trouble quite fast. And then, the other one is for every domain, set up maximum 3 inboxes, which means if you want to have 60 inboxes, you need a lot of domains. And we'll go about how we solve that in a sec as well. The other one is restructuring the content of the email itself, especially for outbound emails, not including too many links, not including photos, a very simple signature, because even adding a phone number in the signature is tracked as a link, is included as a link. Having multiple campaigns not running towards the same person at the same time, and then using Spintex if you can, so that you can change the body of your email even a little bit, that can definitely help. But the other thing is, what I wanted to mention, it was on the slides as well, is we used to have like one email template. That email template worked, and we just scale that. That's the comment. That no longer works because thanks to AI, and this is a negative side effect, Google, Microsoft, all the ESPs can now track if you're sending the exact same email to the exact same person at the exact same day or time. And now you have to keep changing the body of your email, the copy itself, a little bit with every prospect, just to make sure that it passes the spam filters. And then let's move on to the next slide. The other one is avoiding links or images as much as you can. And then open tracking, we've mentioned it before, has been increasingly marked as spam. Emails that include open tracking have been increasingly being marked as spam. I'm not saying don't use it. We use it ourselves, as I mentioned. Just be mindful and keep tracking your spam and deliverability stats just to make sure there's no ups and downs. And if there are, make sure that you turn off both open tracking as well as link tracking. Yeah, open tracking, we discussed it again. I mentioned it before as well. Google, they're not technically saying don't include open tracking because, it's quote unquote like a secret, whatever. But that warning there that images in this message are hidden and that might be suspicious or spam. I mean, come on, like Google knows exactly what you're doing. Google knows exactly what we're doing. They just don't want to say this person is doing mass sending or they're tracking open rates. And they just result to saying things like that, which is just crazy. Yeah, and the other thing is hope is not lost, right? One KPI that we track that really helps us is what we call positive reply rate, which is out of all the replies you received, how many were positive? Because if you're doing outbound, if you're doing mass sending, I'm sure you're receiving a lot of responses that are either negative, unsubscribe, out of office, etc. So if you're able to have at least 25% of those replies being positive, so 25% or above positive reply rate, you should be in a good spot, no matter what your open rate or click-through rate stats are saying, no matter if you're tracking them or not. So yes, things are harder, but also there's workarounds and things that we can track in order to get to the same result.
Yeah, I think we touched on the warm-up side of things a bit already, but this is definitely something that can help you land in the inbox, especially when you're sending a higher volume or starting to increase your volume. So what warm-up does is send emails automatically from your sending account to a list of seed email addresses, in our case, that ZeroBounce controls. Now, there are a few other warm-up tools out there, and there's a few different methods of doing it. This is the method that we use, using a controlled seed list rather than not having control of the accounts, because you don't want to be associated with negative or spam accounts. So this way you have, like I said, it's an insurance policy. You have that guaranteed level of positive engagement where we're sending positive replies. If you do land in spam, we move them into the inbox. We engage with those emails. And again, that's going to increase your sender reputation and make your actual campaigns more likely to land in the inbox.
Yeah, and I do need to add a note there. The quality of the warm-up tool you use directly impacts the effectiveness of the warm-up because, as you said, there's a lot of warm-up tools out there, and I'm not going to mention any, that are quite cheap, that offer unlimited warm-up, which really sounds good in theory. But what happens is, if you think about it, spammers who are similar people to genuine good intent people and marketers doing outbound or cold email or email marketing, they have leverage if they're using email warmup. And they're going to be the first ones to be using email warmup because they're doing it at scale, professionally, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're using a cheap tool that everyone else is using, there's a good chance that your domains, your sending domains, are associated with the spammer's domains. And if the spammer ends up running campaigns on all sorts of crazy things or ends up getting high bounce rates and spam complaint rates, your campaigns, your inboxes end up getting affected by that as well. So having a seed list definitely helps with the effectiveness, pretty much with like how easy it is for you to go into the inbox. I've had a lot of friends come back to me and say, hey, I used this tool, or even without mentioning the tool, they would say, hey, I'm doing warm up and I'm seeing that I'm not getting replies, and my inbox provider is saying that we're in the inbox and all that. And when we look into their sending infrastructure, there's typically providers that are a bit more random, and I'm sure that they don't land on the inbox. So yeah, it's definitely a big thing to be mindful of there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other one is, I mean, if ZeroBounce and verification of email says anything, is excluding unverifiable emails. There's a process called email waterfall. You can find it in a lot of different tools out there, including Clay. And I'm not going to spoil product news from ZeroBounce's end, but there's quite a few hot things coming. Definitely, ZeroBounce is like the number one tool that we use in our email validation flows as well. Pretty much the main gist of it is make sure that you have a step where you validate the email addresses that you find and exclude any catch all or unverifiable emails from your list, or at least deprioritize them. Because the moment you send emails, even to catch all or unverifiable emails, your sending reputation is going to, and your deliverability as a result is going to drop, because the emails are either going to land or land on the spam folder. Another tip to use as well, and I'll explain in a sec how you can do it, is start sending only to Google verifiable emails, and then continue with others, and then do Microsoft in the end, again, because Microsoft is the easiest one to characterize you as spam. They have the strictest spam filters right now. So if you start by sending emails to any recipient that has Google as their inbox provider, and then other providers, then Microsoft, you have the highest chances of landing on the inbox and not impacting your inboxes. How that's doable, we'll explain in a second, the second part, when we discuss a little bit more advanced techniques. Yeah, the other one that can definitely help is if, besides email, you also use LinkedIn outreach or multi-channel outreach. A really nice workflow that we have is when we use Lemlist to run outbound campaigns, we'll find as many emails as we can using Clay, using Apollo, etc., verify them using ZeroBounce, and then for the emails that are unverifiable or catch all, what we're going to do is, if we have the prospect's LinkedIn profile, we're going to put them on the Lemlist workflow where we only do LinkedIn touch base, only LinkedIn touch points pretty much for them. So in that case, we can maximize the number of people that we end up reaching out to. Yeah, and if you're running meta ads, you can also include them in your custom audiences to increase the chances of your ads being shown to the right people. Nice. Now let's go look into some more advanced things.
Yeah, so I think we're going to run through some specific tools that you can actually use to optimize deliverability. Try not to take too long because I want to leave some time for Q&A, but key tools that everyone should be using. So when you're looking at your email service provider, you want to look for these specific things. So firstly, someone who's emphasizing deliverability, if they don't talk about it at all, then maybe they're not really the provider that you want to go with. Like we said, this has been a continual trend over the last few years. So maybe some of the older tools out there aren't necessarily built with that infrastructure in mind. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. Looking at dedicated IPs. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today has been auditing and analyzing where you're at and looking at your KPIs and analytics. So you want a tool that's got very robust analytics so you can constantly see where you're at. Like Bill said, you can do a more simple approach, just like using a Google Sheets and tracking it that way, but you still need to have access to those analytics and to be able to measure where you're at, spot any red flags that come up with deliverability, because that's really going to prevent long-term issues. And then obviously segmentation, again, that's something we've touched on in terms of making sure the messages are relevant. So you want a tool that's going to allow that to be possible, as well as obviously integrations into the CRM, just to make everything run a bit more smoothly. Again, I mentioned before that everyone should be using some sort of email verification, whether that's ZeroBounce or another platform. I strongly recommend that everyone is validating their emails. Also, on top of that, there's the API component. If we can go on to the next slide. You've obviously got the initial bulk cleanup that you can do, or whether that's integrating with a CRM or uploading a spreadsheet. But the next kind of level up from that is using an API at the point of sign up to make sure those emails are correct. And that's really going to stop that bad data even getting into your database in the first place, as well as obviously having that segmentation of your list to be able to analyze that data going forward and assess the different data sources like we talked about. again, deliverability testing and monitoring comes back to auditing your infrastructure, making sure that's correct, and yeah, really spotting any red flags before they come up, like we said. And Bill, I think if you want to jump in.
Another thing as well that we've seen is not just using any inbox provider, but using multiple inbox providers. Mm-hmm. We used to do outreach only with Google inboxes, and then Google started becoming more wonky, and we had to diversify. You'll see them being mentioned as either custom or SMTP providers. There's quite a few out there. We've been using Mailforge for quite a bit. I would recommend testing at least 2 email providers with your campaigns. Maybe have one of them being Microsoft or Google as the main one, and then having another one at least as backup, and then checking with your campaigns which one delivers best, especially because based on your industry and based on the company sizes that you're reaching out to, as well as the geo, you might end up seeing different results. Another really interesting point, I touched on it before, is we've seen that emails sent from Google to Google inboxes, from Microsoft to Microsoft inboxes, and Outlook to Outlook seem to have better deliverability, simply because Google is a little bit more hesitant to block other Google senders. Same for Microsoft. How you can do that is really straightforward. You can use, we have a Clay template actually. You can use Lead Magic. You can use Clay as well. You can use, I don't know if it's possible with ZeroBounce as well to find the type of email inbox a certain user, a certain domain is using. But as long as you have a tool that allows you to do that, you want to match that with your inboxes that you have set up.
Yeah, we do actually provide the MX records as part of the data you get back, so you can check that.
Yeah, so that's a really cool one. So yeah, if you're already using ZeroBounce, then make a note in your process that when you get the results back, prioritize Google inboxes. If you have users that have email accounts that are on Google, add them to your Google inboxes that you have for sending, and do the same for Microsoft. Another one is, obviously, I mentioned it before, enterprises use more Microsoft inboxes. Small and medium and local businesses use Google a little bit more. Using dedicated infrastructure as well. It kind of goes back to the seed list that Jack mentioned that ZeroBounce does. Pretty much using dedicated infrastructure means having a server that is not shared with other people when you're doing sending. There's a few of them out there. Again, InfraForge is one that makes sense, but there's also Mailbrief. There's a few more providers that allow you to set up a server just for you. The only downside is a lot of these providers are a little bit expensive, but it's definitely worth checking it out, especially if you're reaching out to industries that are a bit trickier. For example, if you have to do outreach to Google inboxes, it's best that you separate that using a domain of its own, using a server of its own for the sending, so it doesn't impact the other accounts or the other recipients on your lists. Yeah, then as I mentioned before, prioritizing Google inboxes. How do you identify someone has a Google inbox? We've touched on it. Use Clay, use ZeroBounce, use Lead Magic. There's quite a few tools out there. All you need is to have the knowledge that you have to do that, and then obviously avoid catch-all email addresses. Yeah, people say that AI is amazing because it allows you to do copywriting. I tend to disagree. AI is amazing at identifying a company's industry, at doing research and fetching information from a company's website, pretty much what a BDR or SDR would do. When it comes to outbound, if we really want to use it for copywriting, I don't use it to be creative. I use it because we've seen that if every email that you send, every single email to a different recipient is at least 60% different, then that can allow you to bypass spam filters more effectively because they assume that it's a different email. So that's pretty much. So what we do is we don't try to make the entire sequence more personalized. We use Twain pretty much for that because its copywriting skills are on point, specifically for cold email at scale. And we personalize the intro line, the intro line or starting line for email number 1. And that kind of changes the flow itself. Yeah, you can obviously also do it via ChatGPT. I'm not going to touch on that. We've seen really good results even within Clay. So it can be automated. And on the left, you can see the copy before and after. Same, you can do that within Twain and have that integrated within Clay. Yes, we're big Clay lovers at SalesCaptain. ZeroBounce as well. Let me say that it's the last step always before a list goes out to the sending tools. Like it's always ZeroBounce verification tests. All right. Yep. Personalizing variables using Lemlist. Also, if you're using Lemlist for your sending and multi-channel outreach, you can use that. Yeah, no, let's not take too much time on that part. And then, yeah, a few advanced email warm-up tips. Again, I think we mentioned it before a little bit. Personalized warm-up emails, warming up using your real email templates, and also the quality of your warm-up provider matters quite a bit. Jack, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so with our warm-up, we do have the option where it's completely managed and done for you. And in that case, the copy is automatically generated. But you also have the option where you manage it yourself. You get the lead list or the seed list rather. And in that case, you can actually control the copy. So you can make the copy similar to what your actual campaigns are going to be. And obviously that's like another way you can increase the chance of landing in the inbox.
And then weekly inbox placement tests. I mentioned it before, you should be checking at least once a week that your emails are going to the right folder, to the inbox, and then to the primary tab. Again, Jack, I don't know if you have any more tips for us. I've added a few notes from our end, what we do when we see that the weekly inbox placement tests fail, but the inbox is back to warm up for 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, one really useful thing with this is seeing the placement by different providers and the spam placement by different providers. So you can see, okay, if we're having a particular issue with sending to Yahoo emails, for example, and then you can actually tweak your campaigns based on that. So that links back to what we were saying with getting quite fine-grained with matching your sending providers and actually looking which sending provider you're sending to within your email list.
It's becoming quite a theme, isn't it? Like it used to be super simple, straightforward. You now need all this kind of in-depth knowledge to make it work. Yeah, another one, we're still testing it, is domain masking, because when you use multiple domains, they typically all redirect to the same main domain, your website, and Google and Microsoft might assume that this is spoofing. That's the technical term for it. So there's tools like Email Guard that allow you to kind of circumvent that. It is an added cost. We are still testing it, but it's coming straight from the SalesCaptain GTM lab. I thought we shared. We are seeing good results wherever we used it, but I don't think it's like a must-have, at least not yet. Yeah, and then rotating your infrastructure, making sure that you have. We've seen this with a client that does a lot of sending to local companies in the US, and we send to roughly 10,000 people a month, so about 40,000 emails sent just for one client. And we have certain inboxes in one sending provider and warm-up provider, and another batch of inboxes to another one. And then every 2 to 3 weeks, we switch them. So that way, all the domains remain warmed up, and they all have a period where there's no sending happening, and they have time to go back to perfect health before we add them back to the campaigns. Yeah, another one that Jack touched on quite a bit is, what are you saying to your emails and how do you deliver value? The number one thing, honestly, that people hit the spam complaint button or even unsubscribe is because they don't resonate with whatever they've read. I call it replies audit. Whether people are responding positively, negatively, or kind of meh, gives you different insights. And also, if they're cursing at you, most likely you're reaching out to the wrong audience. That's the first one. If their responses are a little bit like meh, maybe not now, no, not interested, etc., it's usually that your offer or your pitch is not good enough to get them interested. So you need to be working on that in parallel with your infrastructure and improving your infrastructure for deliverability. Because if what you're saying resonates, no one has any reason to hit the spam complaint button, whatever the case is. So having a good offer is not just a must-have for vanity purposes. It's also like a really good boost for deliverability itself, because the cycle for outbound is you send out something that doesn't resonate with your audience. Your audience either doesn't respond or marks your emails as spam, both of which are actually being interpreted by Google and Microsoft as low engagement with the emails you send. Then your deliverability drops, because obviously people aren't responding. Google starts putting your emails on spam, deliverability drops, inbox health drops, your campaign flops, because you can't do any sending because your emails are landing into spam. So kind of it's a cycle that whenever we're seeing bad deliverability, we always go back and check, okay, what did we send and to which audience? Because technically we have to correct the factual cause, which is the inboxes need to be warmed up, our infrastructure needs to be a certain way. But the deeper reason is always that the message doesn't match with the audience. And unless you fix that, you're going to end up into the exact same deliverability loophole, maybe in 3 to 4 weeks, which is not a good place to be. Yeah, and then using inbound-led outbound. This is super cool, especially for companies that are not just doing outbound, but other marketing activities, which is pretty much most companies out there. There's a lot of signals nowadays that you can interpret from website visitors using RB2B, Snitcher, Clearbit, LinkedIn profile visitors that you can track, companies hiring, job changes, company news, intent, customer intent signals, and Clay. You can leverage people submitting your forms on your website. You can leverage that data to reach out to people who are already aware of who you are or what the problem in their market is, versus just random people that, just going plain cold, because that allows you to enhance the results that you get and thus get better deliverability as a result.
Nice.
And we made it. Paul is back.
Yeah, Paul.
Okay. Well, good job, gentlemen. Lots and lots of high-level information here. Bill, I had one real quick question, because I'd never heard this before. You mentioned that phone numbers in some cases can be seen as links.
Yeah. So the way the email protocol has been set up, phone numbers, if you've ever checked an email signature, they're actually clickable. So the way a browser interprets them, or an email inbox provider interprets them, if they're structured correctly, you'll see tell, a thing in a parenthesis, and then 2 dots, and then the phone number, and it's clickable. This is an automated behavior, and they are indeed perceived as a link.
Okay, very interesting. Anybody else? Any questions?
Or if you don't add formatting, or if you split the numbers and there's no dots, it still appears as a phone number, but it's not technically tracked as a phone number.
That is very good to know. Interesting. Any other questions from anybody? You guys did such a phenomenal job.
Answered every question already.
Exactly. Just from the side. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
seems like we're covered. You can use the comment section on the right if you still have anything that we haven't covered. Oh, there's one that just came in.
Okay. Let's see here. Let's pull this question up. This comes from Nicoletta. She says, hello, and thank you for this detailed presentation. I have been given a Gmail account to use for a specific lead list that is supposed to be safe. I checked through Lemlist Account Health, and MX, SPF, DKIM, DMARC seem to have been set up. But how is this possible if there is no active workspace? And how am I supposed to set up custom tracking? Thank you, Nicoletta.
I think the question to ask is it an actual Gmail address, like is it at gmail.com, or is it a work email address, in which case it's a Google Workspace account. If it's a Google Workspace account, whoever set it up, the workspace, will have access to it and should be able to update the DNS. Technically, you don't need to do it on the Google Workspace account. You need to do it on the DNS the name server where the domain was bought, because SPF, DKIM, DMARC, MX, custom tracking, link tracking, open tracking, they're all set up as DNS settings wherever it is that you bought the domain and they're managing it. So that's the place you should be looking at in order to update those. Yeah.
All right. Well, if we see any other question trickle in, we will get to that.
Yeah, we have this over on the ZeroBounce website. You can check any new email for free. So if you want to test out the validation, you can do that directly on the website, or you can also create a free account. And in that case, you'll get 100 free credits to run a validation. So that's a great way to test out the platform, as well as testing out the deliverability tools as well.
Yeah, and just checking a small sample of their prospect list or contacts just to see, what percentage might actually be faulty. I think there's one more question in the chat.
Yes, we have one more question from Mike. How would someone go about setting up BIMI to help with deliverability?
Jack, do you want to go for it, or do you want me to?
I believe within Google accounts, it's done within the settings, but you might have more insight than me on that.
It is. BIMI records, I don't know if you've ever seen the logo of a company presented in a blue check mark inside of your Google inbox. Pretty much that happens if you have a BIMI record set up. The hard thing to do with BIMI records, not hard, but the expensive thing to do is it requires you to buy a certain certificate, which you can buy from the companies that issue SSL certificates, which I think costs more than $1,000. I think around $3,000, depending on where you buy it from, and you need that to create the BIMI record. Other than that, it's as simple to set it up as setting up SPF or DKIM. You just need this certificate, which costs a little bit. So you can set it up on your main domain. I wouldn't do it for 100 domains that you'd buy for outbound, for example. I would set it up on your main domain, but it is a little bit expensive, the process itself, because it requires a certificate to set it up. You can definitely find guides online. You can DM me on LinkedIn if you want, and I can send you that way, or I can send you a guide. But yeah, the only consideration is it's a little bit expensive to buy the certificate.
Right. Very good.
Oh. Jack, feel free to, yeah.
There we go, 100 free credits if you sign up for an account, like I was saying. So like Bill just mentioned, it's a great way to run a sample of your lead list through. Even if you think you don't have any issues with invalid emails, you can run a sample through, and most people will probably be slightly surprised with the results they get back with how many invalid or bad email addresses you've got in there. And you can see the full breakdown of the different status codes you get as well.
Yeah, trust me, like I used to think that, okay, we found an email address. Now why don't we use it for outbound? And then the difference we saw when we added ZeroBounce as the last step, even within Clay, using the ZeroBounce API in order to validate emails, it's quite high. So yeah, as you said, people will probably be surprised if they haven't done this before, if they go and do a DNS, if they go and do an email validation check, even with a sample of their lead list.
Yeah, definitely. And feel free to use that QR code to schedule a demo with myself. I can run you through the platform, or drop me an email, jack@zerobounce.net, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Either way, we can set up a demo, maybe get you some extra free credits as well.
Nice. Save the best for last. Yeah, and then from our end, you obviously have quite a few resources there that we're giving away for the webinar, including deliverability resources, and also a cold email audit. If anyone out there is already running campaigns and they want to have an audit of their deliverability infrastructure, of their deliverability campaigns, we have a survey live that you can take. And then you get a call with our team to provide you with specific insights, but just for the people on the webinar. Don't do it afterwards. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, go for it. It's not something we give away in general because it takes some time from our end. But if you guys stayed with us for the last hour or so, we're going to be glad to help. Yeah, any way we can, your campaigns. Cool. Yeah, you can definitely find both myself and Jack. If you like the session, if you have any questions and maybe you're a bit shy to drop them in the comments, feel free to reach out. We're always there, always happy to help. Outbound deliverability. You know what the guys at ZeroBounce are doing. So yeah, good work from both sides. And I think that's about it. Paul, are you going to
That's it.
Out?
Well, Jack, Bill, it's been a pleasure to do this webinar. I know I've learned a lot. And I hope everybody out there, we had quite a crowd, everyone there from Madison, Wisconsin, York, UK to Ukraine. So thank you all. And I hope everybody out there has a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, guys.